afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Institute for Danube Region and Central Europe for today's discussion on the parliamentary elections in Slovakia. This is a debate organized by Karl-Renner-Institut together with the Political Academy and IDM. It's a part of the cycle of the discussions that we organize always before the elections to set up the scene and think about possible scenarios. You can all evaluate later on how true our estimations were, but today we will focus on what's the state of play before the elections. Just some housekeeping remarks. This is a hybrid discussion. So we are live streaming it on YouTube and on Zoom. You can ask your questions in chat. I will be following them. And of course, after the two rounds of our remarks, we will be opening to audience for the questions. We will start with the opening remark, welcome address by Mr. Gerhard Marchl, head of the Department for European Politics at the Karl-Renner-Institut. We will start with that, and then we will proceed with the panel. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kinga. A warm welcome also from my side. As Kinga said, I'm responsible for European affairs at the Karl-Renner-Institut, the political academy of the Austrian Social Democrats. Yeah, this event belongs to a well-established series of discussions organized by the Political Academy of the ÖVP and of the Karl-Renner-Institut. And with this series of events, we focus on the situation in the respective countries in the forefront of parliamentary elections. Today is Slovakia in our focus. I would say that all three institutions who organize this event have a special interest in the region and in Slovakia, and so does Austria. There are strong human, diplomatic, and economic ties between Austria and Slovakia. Let me mention a few facts and figures. About 50,000 Slovak citizens live in Austria. There are thousands more of Slovak citizens who live in their country, but come to Austria to work on a daily basis. Austria and its companies are the second largest investors in Slovakia. Bilateral trade is constantly growing. Slovakia is the 13th most important trading partner of Austria. For Slovakia, Austria is on rank 6. When it comes to diplomatic relations, there's this Austerlitz format between Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Austria. There's Centrope, this region, this European region around Bratislava, Brno, and Vienna. And yeah, all in all, I would say there are good neighborly relations, but I dare say that mutual interest, especially when it comes to the interest Austrians, the Austrian population, and Austrian media show for Slovakia, there is some room for improvement. Interest could be and should be higher, I think. And therefore, events like this and today's event play an important role in order to expand knowledge here in Austria about Slovakia. We'll talk much about the electoral campaign and about the possible outcome of the elections, and about the scenarios for the coalition building. After the elections, there are many questions. For instance, is former Prime Minister Fico on the verge of a comeback? What will that bring? And yeah, there are many questions. I'm curious and looking forward to the expertise and the answers given by our experts. I would like to thank our experts for coming to Vienna for this event. Let me thank the cooperation partners, especially the Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe, Daniel Martínek and Kinga Brudzińska, and of course the head of the Institute, Sebastian Schäfer. The IDM is the driving force behind this event and this series of events. Many thanks. Many thanks also to the Political Academy of the ÖVP, especially Matthias Weiss. Many thanks for the good cooperation we always have. Yeah, let me wish you an interesting event and pass the word back to Kinga. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gerhard. For me, you mentioned Slovak-Austrian relations. I would say 80% of the situation when I meet someone in Austria and I mention Bratislava, they always mention the boat. So I'm thinking about what's the magic behind the boat trip from Vienna to Bratislava. I hope I will make this trip also soon, but it's true, those are the closest capitals in Europe. But I think many, even people in Central Europe, do not realize that, that Bratislava is so close to Vienna. So now we will proceed with the panel. I would like to welcome our all-star panel today from Bratislava and Daniel from the IDM. So we have today with us Ms. Oľga, Professor Oľga Gyarfášová. This is where I still
European name, but so Slovak with a Hungarian name.
She's an associate professor at the Comenius University in Bratislava. We also have Mr. Grigorij Mesežnikov, and he's the president of the Institute for Public Affairs. We also have my colleague Daniel Martínek. He's a research associate at the IDM. And actually, we'll start with Daniel, who prepared a briefing about the pre-election situation in Slovakia, and he will kick off this panel discussion with his presentation. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kinga, and also thank you very much for taking care of today's moderation. I would like to welcome everyone here, be it here today with us in the room at IDM, or be it here virtually in our Zoom webinar or at our YouTube live stream. And of course, but last but not least, also many thanks to our experts coming to us, visiting us from Bratislava, who will also give us, I believe, excellent insights to the pre-election situation in Austria's neighboring country. As Kinga mentioned, I would like to share with you maybe like first insights to the pre-election situation in Slovakia. I've written a short briefing on the current situation in this country, and now I would like to share some or the most important aspects out of this briefing. So as we know, these elections are taking place as a 9th election since the inception of Slovakia back then in 1993. These are actually already the 4th early elections when we see it from this chronological perspective. Total number of 150 seats will be elected during this election, seats in the National Council, and we have in total 25 running political entities in this election. When we speak about the seats in the National Council, I believe it's important to mention that 76 seats are necessary to obtain the absolute majority or to secure the majority in the parliament. Before I go more deeply in the pre-selection situation, I would like also to mention, which I find important, and that is that it is actually not allowed to vote from abroad. It is not allowed, unlike in regard with some other European countries, to vote through embassies, consulates, or other foreign representatives of Slovakia, but the voters can actually buy a card and which allow them to vote from abroad by a postal service. I believe why is it important? Because if we have a look on the data, for example, back in 2020, during the last parliamentary elections, more than 55,000 applications for the postal voting were submitted, while this year it's more than 70,000. And out of that, around 26,000, that's around 37% are actually from Czechia. And I believe also this vote will play a certain role also then during the election. As I mentioned, 25 political entities are running in this year's elections. When it comes to the current opinion polls, when it comes to predictions, around 8 to 9 political parties are probably able to make it to the future parliament. Of course, the question remains, because what we can observe in Slovakia is that the political landscape is very much fragmented because of the high also polarization of Slovakian society. So it of course remains to see how many of parties are actually gonna enter the parliament at the end of the day. But what we can say for sure from this very moment is that the first leading political parties leading in the current opinion polls are gonna enter the parliament. Here we are speaking about the Smer, Slovakian Social Democracy Party, led by Robert Fico, Progressive Slovakia under the leadership of Michal Šimečka, the party Voice, which are the former members of the Smer party who split it from the party back then in 2020 under the leadership of Peter Pellegrini, and then the party Republika with its leader Milan Kubrick. So what we can see is that from the current election polls is that Smer, SSD party, is leading the current polls, although it changed a little bit during the last couple of days. Of course, one has to say how reliable are the last opinion polls, but what we can observe in the at least past months is that Smer was the leading party when it comes to the electorate decisions, following by the second party, Progressive Slovakia, and then on the third place with around 15% with the last party. As I said, what's for sure is also that Republika party will make it to the parliament, although the support varies from 6 to 8%, but they should probably pass the threshold of 5%. What remains to be seen is if the party coalition of Olano, the Christian Union, and For People, Zaudi, is gonna enter the parliament, because in that case the threshold is 7%, and what the current opinion polls say, this party revolves around 7%. Another parties we can probably make it to the parliament is the KDH party and Freedom and Solidarity Party. I think we probably can't discuss today the pre-election situation without giving a little bit overview what actually happened during the past years, and I would like to focus on the period of the past 3 years where we could observe a rather chaotic government of Igor Matovic. Everyone here definitely knows that Igor Matovic surprisingly won the elections back then in 2020. And if we have a look on his government and his leadership during the past 3 years, of course, on one, we can distinguish actually 2 levels. We have to actually admit that these were quite challenging times for every government in the world. So on the one side, we could see that the government of Matovic had to face the challenges of COVID-19 pandemic, challenges of the Russian invasion in Ukraine and the related migration waves, energy crisis, inflation crisis, and so on. At the same time, of course, the question is how all these crises or this poly-crisis was handled by the government. What we could observe it was a rather chaotic and not so well organized management of this crisis. And at the same time, on the other side, what we could observe were this inter-party conflicts among the governing coalitions during the past 3 years, particularly between the Olano party of Igor Matovič and the Freedom and Solidarity party of Richard Sulik. This actually leads or culminated in the fact that this party left the government in summer, I believe it was in June, July last year. And although the ministers actually still stayed in the government, but then also throughout the time, they also left the government. And all this actually led to the vote of no confidence December last year, which wasn't given the government. And all this also then led to introduction of a so-called expert government in May this year. So that's the situation where we actually stand now. And of course, all these topics, which were the main issues throughout the last 3 years, are also very much used for the pre-election situation for these elections, particularly by the Smer party, Plus party, and all the other parties which were part of the opposition throughout the last years. What is probably important is that also, if we go back a little bit to the past, there was a year 2018, which we can maybe call a turning point in the political history of Slovakia, because the protests took place after the murder of investigative journalist Jan Kuciak and his fiancée Martina Kušnírova, which led to the fall of the Robert Fico's government, which was afterwards led by his colleague Peter Pellegrini until the elections 2020. And why I'm actually mentioning that is that many people perceive this government, Fico's government, and his party members as very much connected to the corruption in the country, to clientelism, to erosion of state institutions, influence on police, judiciary, on media, and so on. So I believe this is important also to mention when we want to speak about this year's election. Therefore, also many people see these elections to be pivotal one, because we are actually, from their perspective, we are actually deciding between the, as Michal Šimečka would put it, between the past and connected to Robert Fico's government, and between the future represented by Progressive Slovakia, if you allow me to put it that way. We will definitely touch upon later on during the following discussion, but what I would like to maybe map out at this moment is 2 scenarios of post-election development. The first one would be that the Smer party will win the elections, and all the post-election development will revolve around the coalition of Smer party as a leading force, which might be joined, for example, by a Hlas party. Many members of this party are actually much favor to form a coalition with Smer party, although they split it, as I mentioned before, 3 years ago. But they are in favor rather, for example, than joining the Progressive Slovakia. Of course, that's logical or understandable from the ideological point of view, if we consider that both of these parties are following the social democratic ideological course. What remains to be seen is actually how they can actually build a strong coalition which would be stable enough to last for the upcoming 4 years election cycle. For that, they definitely need another coalition partner. It can be the SNS party, the Slovakian National Party, which were actually part of the Fico's government in the past years when Fico was in power. And of course, there is also the question if Republika Party would join such a coalition. Robert Fico, during the past weeks or during the debates, at least, he always ruled out such a cooperation. But I think one thing is what he's saying actually now, and another thing is also the coalition potential of the Smart Party after the elections, and how the situation will look like, and to what extent Robert Fico will be forced to find another coalition partner, maybe particularly with the Republican Party. Another scenario, the second scenario, although less likely, a realistic scenario is that Michal Šimečka will be the future Prime Minister of Slovakia, leading his Progressive Slovakia party. And then we would need to see again what is the coalition potential with this party, because we can see that they have a different point of view or different program compared to Smer and Hlas party. Although there are some social aspects when it comes to Progressive Slovakia, we can clearly see that when it comes to ideological point of view, there are different, there are simply tensions and conflicts, ideological conflicts. Smer and Hlas are rather conservative parties. Progressive Slovakia is very much a liberal progressive party. So of course it needs to be seen how these tensions will be overcome when it comes to the coalition between Progressive Slovakia and Hlas party. The coalition potential, of course, can be strengthened by joining forces with other small parties. As I mentioned at the beginning of this briefing, these small parties are revolving around a 5% threshold. So it remains to see if they can actually make it to the parliament. But many predictions are given the highest chance to Freedom and Solidarity Party. So that might be one coalition partner for Progressive Slovakia, and maybe also the KDH party, where we would again need to see how they can overcome the ideological conflicts when it comes to their programs. Not looking only on the domestic or the coalition potential of these different parties after the elections, I would like to also mention what is going to happen on the rather broader regional scope or European scopes, when if we expect the victory of Robert Fico and his party. I would say that from what we could heard actually from Robert Fico in the past weeks or months, we can expect Slovakia going in the direction when it comes to the foreign policy, direction, for example, of Hungary or Austria, when it comes to the support of the attacked Ukraine. What we can also observe is that maybe, as I'm mentioning also in the written briefing, that we could maybe see a split when it comes to the Visegrad group, that we would have like two camps, so to say. One camp of countries of Czechia and Poland who are very much in favor of supporting Ukraine and do whatever they can to support the attacked country, and on the other side Hungary and Slovakia who are like reluctant to provide at least the military support to Ukraine. Of course, all these aspects remain to be seen how they develop them also after the elections. Also, when it comes to the whole coalition, what are going to be the pressures from the other parties? But what we can observe, what we could potentially observe if Fico wins the elections, is that he would definitely play this card when it comes to foreign policy, not to focus on the European Union solely, although he's very much supporter of the European project, although criticizing the European Union institutions, but he's very much favor of the European integration. He was actually the one who brought Slovakia closer to the European Union by Slovakia entering the Schengen zone, introducing the euro in Slovakia and so on. But at the same time, he will also look on the other side of the world, so to say, being towards Russia, being towards China, and so on. But I believe this is something we are also going to discuss during the upcoming discussion, to which I am very much looking forward to. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So now I would welcome Oľga and Grigorij to maybe invite you to comment on the presentation, but also maybe give us a glance of what's the mood in Slovakia nowadays. How do you evaluate the campaign or major political parties or those that actually might be in power? And it would be also interesting to know in this first round of discussion what were the top issues discussed in Slovakia in terms of the elections.
Okay, so maybe I will start. Good morning, everybody here in the room and also in the virtual space. And thanks for invitation and thanks for this excellent introduction, because almost everything has been said, and it's good that you made it, Daniel, because to understand Slovak politics with these 25 running parties, I think it's a challenge. But you have seen that some of them are really very small to be decisive in this election. So maybe I will continue with the general climate in the society, because you gave us these very important milestones in the development within the last 3.5 years. So that means since 2020 elections, and really it was something what Slovakia did not face before. So I understand that entire EU and maybe entire globe is facing the poly crisis with the global challenges, but we really had also this domestic crises and challenges which left the society in a very, very pessimistic mood, and having, for example, so many changes within one electoral circle. Yeah? So worth to say also that, okay, 2020, Fico and his party, although it was Mr. Pellegrini who was the prime minister at that time, was defeated. So it was a big victory after all the corruption scandals and also the murder, as you mentioned it. But then step by step, we understood that this victory doesn't help us a lot, because really the government was challenged by COVID, which came immediately after the election. The way how the first prime minister of this government, Mr. Matovič, did his job really, so it was mismanagement, very chaotic. Then okay, so there was the shift, the change, but Mr. Matovič took the job of the Minister of Finance, but still was a gatekeeper, and he was really using this position. Then finally, okay, the mistrust vote, and for the first time Slovakia had this technocratic or experts government appointed by the president, also an important actor in these political processes. And this technocratic government, so she was or she is absolutely excluded from this political competition, what enabled this government to make a lot of very rational decision, and being politically maybe boring, but very efficient in running the ministries and running the European structural funds and the plan for reconstruction and reconstruction and resilience, which plays a quite important role in Slovakia, unlike in other European countries. So just to say you two numbers, the government ended, Mr. Heger's government ended with less than 20% of trust. the parliament the same. But what is maybe even more important, we are following one indicator from the 1990s, asking what do you think, is the country heading right direction or wrong direction? Last year, the wrong direction was over 80%. So it was a historical maximum of very pessimistic and frustrated mood. And I think that it is also reflected in the campaign. And the main specificity of this campaign is that because we have this technocratic government since May this year, so this standard dividing line between coalition and opposition, because this is the opening situation for each general election in parliamentary democracies, was diminishing, was not so much present, and did not structure the political competition in the usual way. Very shortly also, maybe to political scene, and then I leave this topic to Grigorij, who is a political scientist primarily. I'm sociologist primarily. But you have seen that there are two parties which are on the top of this polling. Yes, so it's still not clear who will be the electoral winner. And I'm emphasizing the word electoral because it's not enough to win the election by the number of percent of votes, but to have coalition potential. And this is something, so we do not have, and maybe this is a good news for our politics, that none of the political parties is strong enough to monopolize the coalition or the coalition building, unlike in Fidesz, for example, in Hungary, or in last election, the center-right coalition. So that means that even this strongest party have to rely on cooperation with the smaller parties. But if we take Smer, SST, and just a short footnote, this second S is for Slovak. So that means we have Slovak social democracy, which is maybe saying for itself that it's not the standard European social democracy, but it's something what we have only in Slovakia with this party. On the one hand, and Progressive Slovakia on the other, they are really representing two Slovakias, so to say. And this is also the problem of deep polarization. And okay, so we can use the metaphorical labels like the past and the future, but behind these labels are very concrete consequences for how the power will be executed, how the judiciary will work if the process of putting the corrupted politicians to the fair judiciary process will continue, and also consequences for the foreign policy orientations, be it Central European format or be it European Union, or even, or maybe this is recently one of the hottest issue, the conflict in Ukraine. So then maybe I could say more about the campaign in the second part.
Perfect. This is great. Can I just follow up with, I was just thinking, you said also analyzed from the societal point of view. So would you risk the hypothesis right now that due to the chaos of the last years, do Slovaks have desire or need for stability, which would also imply a strong leader as Robert Fico, or this is too much in this?
Yes, exactly. I agree with that. And maybe this is one of the advantages of Robert Fico's comeback, so to say, because after last split from Smer, so the party really was on much lower numbers, but especially vis-a-vis this very chaotic development. So there is a public quest for firm hand, and also if we are looking on the public opinion polls, really sometimes with very boring feelings that these authoritarian tendencies are the strongest, comparing also to other Central European countries. Okay, so it does not mean that people would give up democracy, because it's in the normative level, it's the ideal without any debates, but more authoritarian way of governing, and this is exactly so one of the keywords of Smer's campaign, the stability. So the certainties or social benefits and the stability, because I think like in many other countries, so this is something that people desire for.
Thank you very much. So, Grigorij, we'll move to you. I know in our exchanges, I asked a $1 million question that I think from the foreign media, what I can see, and if we have any exchanges with our partners in the think tank community, they keep asking about Slovakia future foreign policy, and of course, if the new government, if this is Robert Fico, will stop helping Ukraine. Could you maybe give us from the very beginning, like easy in the simplest possible words, explain to us the complicated internal situation that has an impact on the foreign policy of Slovakia?
I will do this immediately and quickly, but first I would like to thank the three organizers, IDM, Renner-Institut, and Political Academy for inviting me to have opportunity to share with you my views and knowledge. In medias res to this question, but then maybe I will talk also about the general situation. I think that the risk that Slovakia will change its position toward not only Russian-Ukrainian war, Russian aggression against Ukraine, but in some other crucial issues of European policies. I think that this risk is real. This risk is real, and that's why I think that these elections, they are really exceptional. If we would want to somehow characterize the situation now before this election, by the way, yesterday the electoral campaign finished. So now we have 2 days of silence. Yes, on publication of opinion polls is not allowed, and political parties formally stopped their campaign. But now we see that it's a electoral situation and perception of electoral situation is that it's combination of, high attention to elections as such. I have my personal experience in previous elections also. I was targeted by international media, but also domestic media, Czech media especially. And today it's incomparably higher interest and attention. Then expectations of possible dramatic changes. I mentioned one, but I think that not only in foreign policy, but also in domestic politics. And at the same time, these two high factors, but extremely low level of predictability, because the fragmentation of parties seen, what Daniel presented in his presentation, this fragmentation is so high. And of course, it led to the extremely low level of predictability. we can predict maybe only one thing, that either Smer or Progressive Slovakia will win. So it means it's 50-50. And all other results is really impossible to predict, because 5 parties and 1 coalition are in the risky zone. So their support is oscillating slightly below or above the thresholds, 5% threshold for a single party and 7% threshold for coalition. So it means that, all options are on the table. Now, why I think that these elections are exceptional? I think that it's connected first with the whole configuration of political and electoral competition, because since the beginning of democracy in Slovakia, the political scene, party system was divided into 2 groups of parties: national populists with authoritarian syndromes, and then pro-democratic forces. There were different parties. Some parties disappeared, some parties newly emerged, but this dividing line still persists. And in previous elections, it was either about replacement of these governments, so national populist government was replaced by government composed from pro-democratic parties, or 2 times it was a continuation of either national populist or pro-democratic government. But now I think it's not only about replacement of the government, because I have to say that observing the situation in this national populist camp, we see that some parties are today more radical. Some of them, even Smer, which is officially social democratic party, I would say they are self-declared social democrats, and my opinion is that it's not social democratic party, but this party is today behaving, leadership of this party and leader himself, as an anti-systemic party. I will explain more. So my point is that never before the camp of national populist parties, which are behaving as anti-systemic party, was such motivated, such radicalized, and such consolidated. On the opposite side, we see, yes, good position of the main competitor to this camp, Progressive Slovakia, but then plenty of smaller centralized parties which are competing to each other. I think theoretically, it can be cannibalizing of the votes between themselves, but also maybe we don't know. And really, it's difficult to predict how the voters, for example, of these parties will behave, whether they will stay with their parties, or in this situation, in order to prevent the phenomenon of lost votes, they will vote rather for Progressive Slovakia, because it's secure choice. So, and then if this the most dramatic change would happen, and national populists will form the government, I'm not sure that Republica can be there, but it's not excluded. So it means that your scenario, can be divided into 2 scenarios. Because even for Robert Fico, who today he is using the same addressing and mobilization strategies as right-wing parties. The same arguments, the same facts which they mentioned, the same approach, and especially what is, I think, dangerous for relations between citizens. It's not only about political competition, but I think that Robert Fico is inducing to his voters the feeling of deprivation of everything, and people are becoming more and more hateful. So this phenomenon of hate between supporters of parties, I think that today is more visible. Now,
sorry, I think that the names like Peter Pellegrini, Michał Šimečka are known. Could you explain to us who are people from Republika? What is this party?
This party, they are splinters from, as I call them, old fascist party. Old, in Slovak conditions, it means that first time fascist party was elected to parliament in 2016. So then, second time in the previous elections, and during the electoral cycle, similar process as in Smer happened in LSNS, Potreba's party, when part of deputies, MPs, they left this party and established the party with the name Republika. So we have such very strange Republicans. And what they succeeded to reach, not changing their ideological profile, their preferences, but just applying more sophisticated method of presenting themselves. They succeeded to be perceived as a non-extremist party. So the same people who were with Kotleba, today, according to our opinion polls, they are not perceived by the population as an extremist party, unlike Kotleba's party. Still, Kotleba's party is perceived by big part of the population in the representative opinion polls, but 75% as an extremist party, as a really right-wing party, far-right, fascist party. But Republika, thanks to their new image, only 25% perceive this party as a non-extremist. But I mean, this is party which, as I said, was founded by the former leaders. Milan Uhrik was the vice chairperson of this party. He is a member of European Parliament and all other people. And Uhrik himself, he was a Holocaust denier, and one of the other prominent person in this party, Milan Mazurek, he was even Holocaust approver. What they really changed? They somehow maybe not stopped, but they are not publicly speaking about these topics, which are revealing that they are still neo-fascist, neo-Nazi party. So that today they are not speaking proactively about Second World War with their revisionist theories, the admirers of Slovak fascist state, which collaborated with Nazi Germany. But in their answers to the questions, if there are questions about this, then they're trying somehow to maneuvering, hiding their open revisionist views. Concerning their positions in the issue of liberal democracy and Slovakia's pro-Western foreign security and defense orientation, they are on the opposite side as systemic forces are. So they are against liberal democracy. So it means that this party is really anti-systemic. They want to erase liberal democracy. I mean, it's not about even, just the worsening of the quality of liberal democracy. They want to introduce another system. And in foreign policy, they are against our membership in the European Union. Now they are masquerading this, that actually they are not for leaving European Union, but European Union should be somehow being transformed into another grouping. And they are openly against NATO. They call NATO criminal pact. So that's why I am quite, I doubt that even for Robert Fico, who is today himself behaving in some issues as an anti-systemic leader, but I think that he is still, he crossed many red lines, but he is enough pragmatic not to be directly somehow allied with the neo-Nazi party, neo-Nazi party, and I think that he will do his best to avoid creation of the coalition with Republika, but still this option still exists. I mean, the probability exists, maybe not high level of probability, but I would say last resort, if all other scenarios will fail. And the main motivation of Robert Fico is not purely political, just to grab power and then to consume power and benefit materially or immaterially from other opposition. The main motivation of Robert Fico, I think it's an explanation why he reemerged as this phoenix bird, because he wants to provide 100% secure position that he will not be again in the situation in which law enforcement organ will dare to indict him, as it happened during this electoral cycle, but then using a very strange provision of the law about prosecutorial system, the prosecutor general de facto, formally it's not like what I was say, but de facto pardon or amnesty. So it's very strong motivation, and that's why Robert Fico today is less sensitive in forming the coalition. So potentially coalition with Republika is not excluded, but I think that in this particular issue, creation of the coalition by national populists, absolutely important thing is whether Slovak National Party, which is less radical than Republika, but close to some of their programmatic positions, if Slovak National Party is in parliament or not. If Slovak National Party is in parliament, then in some circumstances, Smer, Hlas, and SNS would have slightly majority. If SNS is not in the parliament, then Smer and Hlas wouldn't have majority. If Fico will invite the Republic, I think that Hlas will reject. So I'm critical toward Hlas, but I don't think that this party, which these people went to the new stage of their political career in order to establish the real social democracy, not this Smer as theirs, Slovak social democracy, but real social democracy. Peter Pellegrini met with Olaf Scholz during quite turbulent development in Europe, concerning the situation in Ukraine. German government was really over busy, I would say, with solving the issues related to this, and Olaf Scholz found 30 minutes to meet with him, but these 30 minutes made, the difference in Slovakia, because many political analysts, not including me, I have to say, but some commentators and journalists immediately perceived this as the indication that really this party is going to be social democratic and no way for coalition with Smer. There are other reasons, I think, which from the reasonable arguments could prevent Peter Pellegrini to form the coalition with Smer, but according to last Pellegrini's performance in the TV debate with the leaders of other parties, I think that he manifested his willingness to form the coalition with Smer. It also has its, I would say, pragmatic side, because inside this party, the leadership of this party, and people who are involved or employed in activities of this party on the regional level, local levels, people in local boards, regional boards, mostly these people are tending to form coalition with Smer. And their argument is that, we were in this party, we know this party, we have the common social positions, we are accustomed to each other, why we shouldn't go to coalition with Smer? The expectation is that Smer will be generous in its offer to Peter Pellegrini personally, maybe, but also to this party. And of course, I have to say that really for Pellegrini, it would be much easier thing to make deals with, let's say, smaller number of players like Smer and Slovak National Party, then with Progressive Slovakia, then 2-3 other center-right parties, which are, of course, smaller parties, but they want to have broader platform for their performance in the government. So for Hlas, the space for more powerful position will be bigger in the case of coalition with Smer. But then the main question is, what was about the whole this case of their leaving from Smer? They left Smer and now they are going back. I think that if it will happen, we can you can not account with this party as a real social democrats. I think that Olaf Scholz will be very disappointed, but it wasn't him who decided. But I am more optimistic. I think that maybe the situation after the elections will be such. It will be very strange, but maybe for Hlas at the end, it will be better to have this partnership with the high number of smaller parties, but having still some perspective for really profilation as a social democratic forces. So, but again, I'm now finishing. It's almost impossible to predict. So, the probability of our Slovakia's stopping delivering weapons to Ukraine really exists. There are reasons why Robert Fico is doing this. There are explanations why population is so, receptive to this kind of arguments. Robert Fico is not openly speaking about support of Russia. He's speaking about peace. In his interpretation, peace will come when Slovakia will stop delivering weapons to Ukraine. We know that it's a false narrative. It's unfair narrative. It's a narrative which, if this scenario would be implemented, would mean defeat of Ukraine by the Russian aggression. But I mean, voters of Smer, some of them are less educated, some of them, they do not understand the peculiarity of, I mean, of the situation today. But some of them are, of course, really pro-Russian. If you talk with people on rallies organized by Smer, many people would tell you that they are open, that they are on the side of Russia. Russia is a big state. They are our Slavic brothers. Russia always helped us, and Smer leaders, they are working with the narratives that the peace and freedom, they are coming from the East. So, and in this electoral environment, I think that it somehow found the positive echo.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think also if you travel in Slovakia, further east you go, then with all the billboard campaigns, you can see even the slogans and the language that, of course, goes into the more pro-Russian narratives or feelings. Before I give Daniel you a floor to give us your take and maybe also zoom out a little bit from Slovakia itself and tell us how, for example, it's seen in Czechia, the elections. You also been through election period and new government. You can tell us your observation. Plus, you already started to discuss this position of Slovakia in Central Europe. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about how do you see the future of the Visegrad cooperation, given that a lot of this uncertainty in Slovakia. This is a difficult task, but maybe also about the Austerlitz Slavko format. How do you see it? The future, I think Slovakia now is presiding the group. How do you see this cooperation? But before I go to Daniel, I wanted to ask our participants to think about the questions, and after Daniel finishes, we will open it for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Kinga. Before I start with these topics you were asking me for, I would like to maybe briefly comment on Grigorij's intervention on this excellent analysis of the coalition potential of the Smer party. What I would like to add is that actually, despite of all these softer communication, avoiding controversial historical topics, maybe suggesting EU, like a referendum on EU NATO membership and so on behalf of the Republika Party, I also think that actually a Smer party could use this situation after the elections as a leverage towards the last party for them to really join the coalition in order to avoid the Republika joining the coalition. So that might be, I think, one of the crucial points. And you mentioned that actually many of the last party members are actually in favor to rather join Smer party than, for example, Progressive Slovakia. Also, there was this opinion poll where they asked voters of last party, and even then they were also much more in favor for last party joining the Smer party rather than Progressive Slovakia, be it because of the ideological or program platform, or just like from the simple fact that the last party was split from the Smer party, and they can find better common ground when it comes to Smer party rather than to Progressive Slovakia. When it comes to Czechia and Slovakia, there was actually just recently this escalation point between Robert Fico and Petr Pavel, the Czech president. I think it wasn't meant that way from Petr Pavel that, the relations between Czechia and Slovakia would somehow go through significant transformation or something like that. It was meant in the way that Petr Pavel definitely was able to, or is able to find better ideological ground with, for example, Zuzana Čaputová, or maybe Michal Šimečka if he happens to become prime minister, rather than Robert Fico, if we can observe what kind of nationalistic radical narratives he's using during the election campaigns, but also from the ideological point of view, and probably most importantly when it comes to Robert Fico's stand on the support for Ukraine, which is like really conflicting point between, for example, Petr Pavel and Robert Fico. At the same time, of course, there are also many supporters in Czechia for Robert Fico, as we could see in the past weeks. For example, Václav Klaus, Miloš Zeman, like supporting Robert Fico in his campaign, but also others, for example, Jiří Paroubek, the former leader of social democracy in Czechia, Michal Hašek, also a member of the Social Democratic Party in Czechia. So all these are actually supporting Robert Fico, and there are, of course, different reasons why they do so. For example, in case of Miloš Zeman, is that they are, of course, good friends, and at the same time, also back then it was also mentioned in the media that, for example, Robert Fico was given with this order of White Lion, like one of the highest awards which can be given on behalf of the Czech state. It was given back then in 2014 from Miloš Zeman to Robert Fico. And of course, Miloš Zeman is supporter of social democracy and so on. But for example, in case of Václav Klaus, there are, of course, different ideological perception. But in that very case, why is Václav Klaus supporting Robert Fico is the reason that he plays simply this nationalistic card, because what we could observe with Václav Klaus in the last years is that he became very much nationalistic when it comes to his, for example, media presence, because he's still given some sort of media presence. He became very much critical of European Union and the European project and so on, advocating for the sovereignty of the member state and so on, which goes again in the direction what is the party's program or the narratives or the labeling Robert Fico is using during the pre-election campaign. So I don't think that the relations with Czechia and Slovakia would probably undergo some kind of huge transformation. I think both countries will strive for good relations, these brotherhood relations we were enjoying in the past decades. And I think that's something which is not gonna change, although maybe the discussions on the presidential level or on the, maybe also even on the presidential level, considering maybe if Pellegrini is gonna run for the presidency, which is still an open question. But on the prime minister level, and maybe on the level of ministries, of course, very much depends on the personalities who will be then ministers. That might be a little bit difficult to really find a common ground. When it comes to Central Europe, as I mentioned in my briefing, I would foresee in the case of Victoria of Smer Party that we would have these two camps when it comes to the positioning towards the Russian war in Ukraine. It will be, I think, actually in both cases, in case of Victoria of Smer Party, but also if they are able to form a coalition revolving around progressive Slovakia, I think the Visegrad cooperation, unfortunately, will be in this coma. How is it now even further? Because still all these questions when it comes to the question of Ukraine, the European integration of Ukraine, when it comes to rule of law, the role of media, judiciary, and so on, these are still such a huge conflicting lines which are currently existing within the Visegrad Group. I believe it's difficult to overcome there if we are going to still have the Law and Justice Party in Poland or the Fidesz party ruling in Hungary. So I believe, despite whatever the election outcome will be in Slovakia, I believe the Visegrad Group will further be kind of dead. Certainly not having such a potential as it had in the past when it strived for European integration of the member countries and so on. And when it comes to Slavko format, I believe it goes very much also in the direction the relationship between Czechia and Slovakia. Also maybe similar to the Visegrad Group cooperation, all the established cooperation among on the ministerial level will probably continue. There will be jointly organized and common projects, as is the case in the Visegrad Group. But again, on the high level from the high level perspective, it of course remains to be seen how actually these high level politicians can cooperate together, how they can really sit down at one table and found common solutions to these challenging questions which our region is facing currently. But I believe the Slavko format will definitely continue. I think it's a very useful cooperation platform, especially for Austria, kind of also maybe avoiding the cooperation within the Visegrad Group. But yeah, it will continue. Both of the cooperation formats will not cease to exist. So yeah, but it will be a really huge difficulty for them to find a common ground.
Thank you very much. So I will open now for questions from the audience, if there are any. Yes, sir.
Different questions. First, which party is now belonging really to the European Social Democratic Association? Mayor or another party? Which party is belonging to EPP? Just to clarify the field, which is very broad as far as I see, with 25 parties running for elections. And how does play out the question of migration in this election campaign? And at the end, how much Russian gas and oil is imported in 2022 into Slovakia?
Thank you very much.
I can start. I don't know. I do not have the exact data concerning the Russian export to Slovakia gas and oil, but I think that there are some.
5% as far as I know, but I don't know exactly. Therefore, I ask.
Well, we are in a quite interesting
Was
position.
very much reduced.
Very much reduced, but also, I mean, the oil is still going through this pipeline because it's a common pipe to Slovakia and Hungary, you know, and somehow Slovakia, in the situation in which it's going from the Ukrainian territory to Slovakia and to this refinery Slovnaft, which is owned by MOL. It's Hungarian company. So I think that so Slovakia cannot reduce immediately, I mean, this type of deliverance, but with gas, I think that it was quite high reduction. But maybe so if Oľga has
I don't have the exact numbers, but I know that because Slovakia was one of the countries which was very much dependent on the Russian supplies, but I think that this diversification went on and was really strengthened last year. But
new line was built from Slovakia to Poland. So
Poland and also the Adria and the others. But
so it's today it's a better situation, but still certain level of dependency exists. But now, officially, Smer is a member party of European Socialists, and they are deputies, MEPs are members of faction of S and D, so Social Democratic. Formally, they are there. Then Hlas is a new party, so it means that they do not have their representation in European Parliament. They do not have the deputies, but they are claiming to be, and they want to be part of this European party groups. EPP, there are, I think that even 4 member parties from Slovakia in EPP. It's Oľano. They have one MEP. Then Christian Democratic Movement. So in Hungarian Hungarian Party Alliance, they are successors party of Hungarian Community, and they are members of this party grouping, but they do not have their members in European Parliament. And then new party Democrats, Eduard Heger, they claimed to EPP. I don't know formally other they are all already members, but they have ties with this party grouping. And Freedom and Solidarity, which is liberal/libertarian party, they were part of the Renew Europe, or ALDE. That time it was ALDE, but then it was Richard Sulik who was their representative in European Parliament, and he personally decided to leave ALDE and entered ECR, so European Conservatives and Reformists. Progressive Slovakia, they are members of I think both ALDE and Renew Europe. So ALDE as a party grouping and Renew Europe as a faction in European Parliament. So it means that formally our parties, they have very developed ties with the European party scene. The question is how they are then transforming the programmatic, ideological, and value background to their open operation. I think that concerning Fico's party, Smer Social Democracy, this level is very high. I think that today it's close to 0, because what they are doing, how Mr. Fico, Comrade Fico, how he is behaving, what he is speaking, how he is mobilizing people, everything. I mean, all these things completely contradict to social democratic credo.
Maybe if I may add, because Slovakia has 14 MEP members, and there are also 2 MEPs from this extreme radical right-wing party. They are not included, so they are independent. They are even not in this Eurosceptical grouping Democracy and Identity. And Mr. Šimečka, who is the leader of Progressive Slovakia, and he is also in the European Parliament, vice speaker, one of the, I think, 14, and they are in the Renew Europe. And your third point was about migration, and I think that it played a role, unfortunately, and similarly to 2015, 2016, and it has to be explained that Slovakia is not so real affected by the migration, because the migrants who are crossing the southern state border, Hungary, Slovakia, so a majority of them, really vast majority of them, are just transiting through Slovakia to probably Czech Republic and then to Germany. So the final destination for them is Germany. And now I think it was early September or late August, so really bigger numbers of migrants from mostly Syria, Afghanistan, North Africa were coming, and this was misused for the campaign, above all by the Smer party, but also Hlas party. So the billboards, "We will stop migrants," but in generally, maybe I think that political communication and political campaigning is changing in all countries, and emotions are playing a bigger role. So it's not anymore the rational competition about public policies, but who is better in mobilizing the fear and anger. And I think that in this respect, really, the migrants are very misused, useful target for this emotional mobilization. But I think that the Ministry of Interior and the police really did his best in making this process of transit as smooth as possible. But yeah, so it's always migrants are a good topic for the campaign.
Factual remarks. I think that the attitude of population to migration issue is maybe slowly, but nevertheless changing, because today in Slovakia we have more than 100,000 of Ukrainian refugees, mostly male refugees. Of course, the situation is that people know that these, foreigners, migrants, refugees, they are on our territory and nothing dramatic is happening. So in relations of people in these localities, okay, state cares about the support, of course, of European Union with these people. So it means that, this feeling that something dramatic, really, that migration is bringing dramatism in society, I think that somehow diminishing. And symptomatic issue is that Robert Fico immediately started to misuse this, this situation, trying to mobilize voters, making very dramatic statements about urgency. He demanded government to send army to the border and so on, plus joined this campaign, installed billboards that we will stop migration. But now look to the rating, to the preferences, so-called voting preferences. Smer didn't accumulate any additional support because of this. So it means that at least, what we know from opinion polls, somehow it doesn't work for these parties. People try to use all other issues, and still he is addressing only core of the traditional Khmer voters and maybe some others, but I think that he failed to use this topic for his for strengthening of party's position.
Can anyone provide a number of asylum seekers in Slovakia?
It's very low.
Very
It's usually one digit number.
Doesn't.
No. Even
Like
not dozens. Yes, because even those who apply for asylum, so they, in a very short time, they leave Slovakia. So that means almost nobody. Okay, so we have to distinguish, and I fully agree that the migrants or the temporary persons from Ukraine is a completely different group of foreigners, and there is a lot of support for them and even attempts to provide them some integration policies. But asylum seekers, it's really very low. So I think it's something like even lower than the dozen. So I know from the migration officer that for last year, so it was maybe 15 or 20 or something like that.
Couple of hundreds with this international protection, I think.
Yes,
Special
they
status.
are combining
Temporarily.
minors temporarily, but yeah, so it's not so, but it's a kind of vicious circle, because the officials are saying, okay, so Slovakia is not the destination country, but why is not Slovakia destination country? Because the migration policy is very, very restrictive. So nobody, or really very, very few, wants to stay, and they have to have some reasons, so maybe already some relatives or some other conditions, but the vast majority is leaving Slovakia. And I think that in a real future, so Slovakia will face the problem of deficit in labor force. A few years ago, so we struggled with high unemployment, But now, we are facing that we do not have even for the investments for the bigger projects enough labor force. So there are recruitments already going on, and I think that the entire debate, entire discourse about migrations will have be shifted and somehow to change the mindset that migration is not a threat, but an opportunity, maybe even a necessity for the country. But it will need some political courage to do so and to make this change.
Thank you very much. If there are, yes, one more.
Here you were mentioning the Visegrad group and like dividing lines. And there is a new dividing line with support for Ukraine, I think, but this is something that I didn't fully understand, like maybe where used to be dividing lines, where are new ones, and which are the coalitions, like which of the countries pair up for different.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the new conflicting line would be, in case of Fico's victory, the approach towards the support of Ukraine, particularly military support, because the humanitarian support might continue even under Fico's government, future government, although maybe also reduced into a certain extent. But of course, this is the new dividing line, and the old dividing lines are, as I mentioned, like generally speaking, different perceptions of democracy, different perception of Polish and Hungarian governing parties on democracy, on the role of media, on the role of judiciary, on the functioning of state, but also on the question, for example, I don't know, education and this kind of issues. So these are simply ideological perceptions or point of views you simply can't somehow easily overcome. And I think this is here to stay. And no matter what the election outcome will be in Slovakia, but what I try to say is actually that maybe Slovakia might be another state who would go in that direction, what we can observe in Hungary or in Poland, because what we could also observe during the pre-election campaigns were the questions on the different kind of ideologies, you know, like how the children or the pupils should be educated in schools, you know, how the state should maybe intervene in these areas, what should be the curricula at schools and so on. So these kind of issues were also topics of the elections, or at least of the election programs of the parties, and all the election campaign revolved around these topics. So that might be Slovakia might become another country who could go in that direction, and then of course Czechia would stand somehow alone in that sense. Although, which brings me actually also into the topic of the migration, I believe that migration, it's like common folklore or common thing, especially or at least in this region, is that the migration is usually politicized or a hot topic during the securitized, exactly.
Presenting as a security.
Exactly. We observed that even during the presidential campaigns this year in Czechia. We observed that back then, 2021 in Czechia, when we had the parliamentary elections. So this issue is going on all the time. Is labeled securitized, politicized, although it's not so much actually affecting these countries. And I'm afraid, because there's also the discussion that maybe Germany, as it's currently receiving many migrants are seeking the refuge in Germany. Germany is actually considering maybe to close or to at least control the borders with Czechia. And we were speaking that Slovakia and Czechia are rather transfer countries for the migrants. So maybe there might be some different developments in the future, which the Ficos or I don't know, Šimečka's government might to cope with. And that might actually become like a true topic affecting maybe also the Slovakian population or the Czech population.
Even a short comment on the Visegrad cooperation, because Visegrad exists for more than 30 years, but there were always different periods of intensity of this cooperation, but also alliances. And I think the 2+2, it started with the backsliders of democracy, if I may use this very simplified label for Hungary and Poland on the one side and Slovakia and Czech Republic on the other. So now so we will see what the outcome of Slovakia's election will be, but this 2+2 would mean, I think, Hungary plus Slovakia being more on the reservation side for assisting Ukraine with the weapons and Czech Republic and Poland, because I'm sure that Poland will stay anti-Russian forever, probably, because it's a very, very strong anchored sentiment in this society. So, and a common denominator for different parties. But I think in this context, and here on Austrian Board institution, I could mention, maybe you read the book by Klaus Legevi and Polish colleague. It was published 2 or 3 years ago. Very critical about the Visegrad and depicting Visegrad countries as the Trojan horse of democracy for the V4 countries. So really being very, very critical, not only on Hungary and Poland at that time, showing also the other 2 countries as the backsliders and really troublemakers for the European Union. But I think that it's a very dynamic situation, and I think that even now, when we address on Ursula von der Leyen was so much strengthening the future enlargement of the European Union. So we will see also how this Central European position will be for the future.
And following on this, so it seems like the axis between Hungary and Poland has actually been weakened, which is maybe even a good message.
I think it's another discussion
Yeah,
about
yeah.
Another election interbox. Yeah.
But maybe if I just in 2 sentences briefly, I think, I wouldn't just like to maybe add on a negative note and to blame Visegrad Group for everything bad happening here. But I think this whole perception on liberal democracy is these shifts or transformation is happening in the whole Central European region, also including Austria or Germany, for example. We can see that also on the opinion polls when it comes to the support of a party or the party in Germany. So I wouldn't blame our populations solely for these transformations. I think that's the approach to liberal democracy is changing everywhere, unfortunately. And so I think from that point of view, the V4 group is not like the only region or only platform where this transformation is kind of happening.
Yes, I will just say that we are running out of time. We can continue this discussion when we finish with our online participants as well. I'll give you a floor. I will just mention that give also the space for final remarks. From what I learned today, some key topics that concern Slovaks nowadays were bringing stability to the country and peace, which is related to support of Ukraine. Migration was mentioned. I was also thinking about the inflation. I saw also many billboards saying that the parties promised lowering prices of groceries and basic goods. I think Slovakia is also one of the top countries in the EU when it comes to the highest inflation. Social benefits for family. I was also wondering how would you see that So in your final remarks, I will give a space for last question, and then if you want, maybe can think and wrap up your synthesis or from the.
I have different questions. How is the relationship between Viktor Orban and Robert Fico? They're sometimes very similar, but there are also problems maybe because you have a big minority of Hungarians in Slovakia, and in this nationalistic view of Orban, he believes that some part of Hungary, there's always some articles in Hungarian newspapers, so there must be a tension between them, between a nationalistic Robert Fico and a nationalistic Viktor Orban, or do they work more together to change European politics in the future if he becomes Prime Minister of Slovakia? Robert Fico?
So I shortly will start. Well, many years ago, relations between Hungarian political representatives and Slovak political representatives, regardless of their political orientations, were based on the attitude to minority issues. And I mean, ethnic Hungarians in Slovakia, relations of big part of the Slovak population with Budapest and so on. And that time, Robert Fico represented the Slovak national interest, and he criticized Hungarian policy, Fidesz, and personally Viktor Orban. But in the last year, somehow, probably mutually, they succeeded to purge, to clean their relations from this ethnic agenda. So today, I think that what creates common platform for better relations between Viktor Orban and Robert Fico. Otherwise, they're not frequently meeting. I don't know. Maybe they are meeting without, I mean, attention of press. But today, this platform is their common positions in some international issues, but also their attitude to liberal democracy. Viktor Orban is openly speaking that he is building another type of the state, the liberal national state. Robert Fico doesn't have any vision, but Robert Fico is behaving, and when he is in power, he is just violating the norms of liberal democracy. I think that this is a common platform for their closer cooperation. And otherwise, I have the experience that they are mutually learning from each other.
Yeah, and just a short comment, the Hungarian minority in Slovakia used to be a very relevant political force, even at the national level. So the parties are very unified and really very pro-democratic actor in Slovakia's politics. Now they are fragmented into 3 smaller political parties, and it looks that they will not gain the political representation again because they lost it in 2020, and probably it will be not renewed. But it's interesting that the common ground in terms of authoritarian tendencies and certain opposition to EU and also the agreement on other political issues is stronger than this earlier nationalistic fight.
Maybe if I just one sentence on that, although the Hungarian minority might not have, again, any representation in the parliament, one should also say that there is, I believe in every country, actually, like representative of the Hungarian minority or of Hungarian origin. I believe it's Progressive Slovakia who has kind of Hungarian platform or something like that.
Also, Oľano.
And Oľano, exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah, much weaker.
yeah, it's not like organized, commonly organized in one grouping, in one political entity, but at the same time there is kind of Hungarian representation among these parties. Of course, it's a question how influential or how much influence it can bring then in the parliament. That's rather I am rather skeptical.
Thank you very much. Thank you all also for active participation and for being with us today. I just wanted to, on behalf of the IDM and our partner institutions, invite you for the similar discussion about Polish elections in 2 weeks. Also, Daniel will have with Thomas Straven, who is the director of FPA, a discussion, post-election discussion on Tuesday. They will see how much their scenarios that were built today materialize. And then we didn't catch up on today, but we on the gender issues and the female perspective, we have a very interesting policy paper coming up comparing Polish and Slovak electoral lists when our colleague Malvina Talik is looking at the comparative perspective on gender that we played in the setup rather to the election. This is all from our side. We wish you that on Sunday you wake up in Slovakia that
Continue to be democratic.
exactly
We
cross that we will be following all closely. So thank you very much for this discussion and